Well, good morning. This is Micah Young with Micah Young Podcast. I want to thank you so much for being with us today. We're going to just jump right into it today. I want to cover something in Luke chapter 24 that is so relevant. And that's one of the things that we want to make sure that we do. That anytime we're sharing, anytime we're covering something, we want to make sure that it's practical, simple, and that it's relevant, and that it's something that you can incorporate into your life. And as we've been talking about the secret place and learning to touch the Lord here and learning to hear Him and fellowship with Him here, we want it not to just be information, but it's our prayer that you will take it and incorporate it, ask the Lord how to apply it to your life. And so that's the heart of so much of what we're sharing. And we're going to start in Luke 24. And let me just say, one of the things that I just love about Jesus' teaching, whenever He teaches, He has such a unique way of taking the natural, taking the physical, and pointing out the spiritual implications behind the physical. You notice the parables that He gives. There was always a spiritual truth that He was getting to in those. And He would take anything in the natural world and, the water and the bread and the wine and anything, just anything. If you look at Jesus's teaching, you see that He was always taking something in the natural and pointing out the spiritual implications behind it. And Luke chapter 24, here's a natural story. This story really did happen. It's not a parable, but behind it are great spiritual implications and truths, specifically tied to the secret place. And so it's a little bit long, but I want to read it. The story doesn't actually begin that we're going to refer to until chapter 13, but the backstory is important, the first 12 verses. And so I'm just going to read through it, and not a lot of comments, and then at the end, we'll kind of wrap it up with some things. Luke 24, verse 1. I encourage you to follow along with me. It says, "But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they came to the tomb, bringing the spices which they had prepared. And they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. But when they entered, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. While they were perplexed about this, behold, two men suddenly stood near them in dazzling clothing. And as the women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground, the men said to them, 'Why do you seek the living one among the dead? He is not here, but He has risen. Remember how He spoke to you while He was still in Galilee, saying that the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and the third day rise again?' And they remembered His words and returned from the tomb and reported all these things to the 11 and all the rest. Now they were Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary the mother of James. Also the other women with them were telling these things to the apostles. But these words appeared to them as nonsense." What a statement. These words appeared to them as nonsense, and they would not believe them. But Peter got up and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen wrappings only, and he went away to his home marveling at what had happened. Now that's the background, because here's verse 13. This is where the story begins. "And behold, two of them," referring to the apostles or the men who were there with receiving this report, "and behold, two of them were going that very day to a village named Emmaus, which was about 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they were talking with each other about all these things which had taken place. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus Himself approached and began traveling with them. But their eyes were prevented from recognizing Him. And He said to them, 'What are these words that you are exchanging with one another as you are walking?' And they stood still, looking sad. One of them, named Cleopas, answered and said to Him, 'Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem and unaware of the things which have happened here in these days? And he said to them, What things? And they said to him, The things about Jesus the Nazarene, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word in the sight of God and all the people, and how the chief priest and our rulers delivered him to the sentence of death and crucified him. But we were hoping that it was he who was going to redeem Israel. Indeed, besides all this, it is the third day since these things happened. But also some women among us amazed us. When they were at the tomb early in the morning and did not find his body, they came, saying that they had also seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just exactly as the women also had said, but him they did not see. And he said to them, O foolish men and slow of heart, to believe in all that the prophets have spoken. Was it not necessary for the Christ to suffer these things and to enter into his glory? Then, beginning with Moses and with all the prophets, he explained to them the things concerning himself in all the scriptures. And they approached the village where they were going, and he acted as though he were going farther. But they urged him, saying, Stay with us, for it is getting toward evening, and the day is now nearly over. So he went in to stay with them. When he had reclined at the table with them, he took the bread and blessed it, and breaking it, he began giving it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to one another, Were not our hearts burning within us while he was speaking to us on the road, while he was explaining the scriptures to us? And they got up that very hour and returned to Jerusalem, and found gathered together the 11 and those who were with them, saying, The Lord has really risen and has appeared to Simon. They began to relate their experiences on the road and how he was recognized by them in the breaking of the bread. While they were telling these things, he himself stood in their midst and said to them, Peace be to you. But they were startled and frightened and thought they were seeing a spirit. But he said to them, Why are you troubled, and why do doubts arise in your hearts? See my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Touch me and see, for spirit does not have flesh and bones, as you see that I have. And when he had said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. While they still could not believe it, because of their joy and amazement, he said to them, Have you anything to eat? They gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate it before them. Now he said to them, These are my words which I spoke to you while I was still with you, that all things which are written about me in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms must be fulfilled. And he opened their minds to understand the scriptures. And he said to them, Thus it is written, that the Christ would suffer and rise again from the dead the third day, and that repentance for forgiveness of sins would be proclaimed in his name to all the nations, beginning with Jerusalem. You are witnesses of these things. And behold, I am sending forth the promise of my Father upon you. But you are to stay in the city until you are clothed with power from on high. And he led them out as far as Bethany, and he lifted up his hands and blessed them. While he was blessing them, he parted from them and was carried up into heaven. And they, after worshiping him, returned to Jerusalem with great joy. And they were continually in the temple praising God. What an awesome story. I mean, how relevant is that for Easter to be coming up in the next couple of days? But there's so much here. What I'd like for you to do is do with Luke 24 what I encourage you to do with Psalms 139. We're going to get into it next time in the next podcast, and we're going to cover a lot of it and talk about the relevance of it. But what I would encourage you to do is take this chapter into the secret place with you. Take it before the Father. Take these verses. Meditate on these verses. Ask the Father to speak to you. Ask the Father to reveal to you, what does this have to do with me? How is this relevant to me? Because listen, this is the awesome thing. We are so intent and so disciplined and so traditional in our approach to Easter and remembering what happened. And that's good. We ought to remember what happened. But these angels that appeared, or these men that appeared to the women, they said, why are you seeking the living among the dead? He is alive, and we can fellowship with him today. We can share with him today, and we can commune with him, and he can break bread with us today. And so I want to encourage you to take this chapter into the secret place as you spend your time with the Father. Read it slowly. Just meditate on it and make a note of the verses that jump out, that the lights come on to you, and ask the Father to speak to you. You may have read this many times. Don't let familiarity rob you of the relevance and the life that the Spirit of God can quicken to us during this time. So I want to encourage you to do that. And then on the next podcast, we're going to begin to get into this, and I'll be sharing with you some of the things, like I did in Psalms 139, that the Lord showed me out of it that are relevant, that is relevant to our secret place and how to live that out. And the thing the most relevant part of this that I want us to see is how to live out the secret place in our daily life, how to learn to touch the Lord in the most difficult situations, in the most frustrating situations, because if he can't be touched then, when can he be touched? And so I want to encourage you to just spend time with this in the Lord. I want to thank you for listening and watching. If you like what you've heard, click like, and if you on YouTube, if you'll hit subscribe, you'll get a notification whenever a new one comes out. So bless you in your time with the Lord, and I pray that he speaks to you and reveals some wonderful things to you. And God bless you today.